What is going on, gunfighters? Saddle up for another episode of Gunfighter Life, where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I am your host, Michael Melito. Today we're going to talk about what I think is a really fun topic. It's been a while since we've done big bore battle rifles, a full-powered battle rifle episode. It kind of just gets you fired up, right? If you're probably aware that I do another podcast called Alpha Male Podcast. And these are kind of the alpha males of the firearm world. So if a big, manly, lot of firepower battle rifle gets you excited, then stay tuned for this episode. I'm going to put in a very short version of the bio to establish some bona fides with the things that God has blessed me to do in life, for I could do nothing apart from Him, and everything I've been able to do is a gift from Him. I'm going to put in a short bio, and then we'll get into battle rifles. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Melito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Do you even big bore battle rifle, bro? So let me start off with some terms here. Big bore. Now, to a dangerous game hunter, big bore means something completely different. But in general, and in like competition circles, which I'm fairly familiar with, small bore is generally considered 22 and down, and big bore is generally considered larger than that. Now, where you draw the line on that is going to be contingent really on you and what you're trying to do. Again, for dangerous game, big bore is something completely different. Like a 35 caliber may be considered medium bore. But for this, I'm going to consider 30 caliber a big bore. Would you consider the new 6.8 a big bore? Yeah, I probably would. Would you consider 6.5 Creedmoor? Yeah, it's right on that line. Like some people would, some people wouldn't. When you compare it to a 22 caliber, a 5.56, certainly it's much bigger than that. So big bore battle rifles, but full size, right? Your full size fighting rifle. Bigger than an AR-15 or an AK-47 for that matter, both of which are intermediate caliber rifles. And I guess that's probably a more substantial way to measure it. A full-powered rifle. A full-powered semi-auto or select fire rifle made for the battlefield. Not made for hunting, made to fight. A fighting man's rifle. Alright, so let's talk about it. I did one of these episodes a long time ago and I was going to recast it. And I went back and I listened to it and the audio was just not good. And hopefully by God's grace, He's allowed me to be a better orator now than I was then. So I'm just going to redo it. I'm just going to rehash it. You can go back and listen to it if you want, but hopefully this will be better quality. The battle rifle. We see kind of the epitome of these in the Cold War. Many of us went to what we consider a big bore battle rifle. The U.S. with the M14, and that was one of my very first rifles that I did any kind of competition with. I like the M14 as a platform. I'm not one of the haters. I don't think it's the best thing today, but I think it's still a good platform. Especially if you get a good, well-made, like a Fulton Armory or something like that. It can absolutely be a decent rifle, although it's a bit heavy. But many of the ones of its era were. The FAL, phenomenal gun for its time. The HKG3, the 91, all the different variants thereof, and I'm not going to get into specifics about that. There's guys that know a lot more about those rifles than I do. I do like them. They are good rifles. The clones, probably to varying degrees of quality control, depending on who made them, who imported them, and modified them. But there's some good rifles. There's some good Cold War rifles. And they'll still fulfill the same role, albeit a little bit more obsolescent and a little bit heavier in general than the modern ones. Maybe a little bit harder to mount optics on, maybe not the best ergonomics, maybe a little bit heavier, but they'll still get the job done. And what job, pray tell, would that be? That job will be slinging a lot of lead down range. Barrier defeating, longer range capability, as in not just the ability to throw a projectile long range, but its ability to have a significant impact on the target at range. You know, with proper BC bullets and stuff, you can get a 5.56 to reach out and touch it 700-800 yards. But it doesn't have the gusto that same 308 is going to have hitting at 800 yards. So there's some application there. And even past really 300 yards, even past 250 yards. Some may even make the argument that at the muzzle, and certainly at the muzzle energy is far higher. And you could debate that, and I'm sure internet forums have ad nausea. But as somebody that's been a professional gunfighter, I'd say in CQB, it's less of an advantage because you get the extra weight. But the further you get out on that battlefield, the more advantage the full power rifle cartridges, 308 being the most ubiquitous, will have. There is a disparity, no doubt, at the muzzle between 5.56 and 308, but you see that disparity kind of showing itself more, in my opinion, out at 250, 300, and beyond. This is part of the reason I believe that the military went with, or is going back to, theoretically, supposedly, that's the plan, the 6.8 caliber, which is a big step up, which if you don't know, the 277 Fury. Actually a really cool name. I like that name, 277 Fury. If you're not familiar, that's pretty much a 270 Winchester in diameter, .277. 270 Winchester's been slaying beasts and putting them in the dirt for a long time. I like that caliber. I've done quite a bit of hunting in my life, so I'm familiar with the 270. It's a good cartridge. It's been around since the 1920s, so it's nothing new. But that case is something new because it gives you the same thing in a shorter action, and it operates at much higher pressures. I believe 270, if memory serves correct, and I'm not looking this up, is 65,000 PSI was the max SAMI when that came out, and the new one is 80,000 PSI, and it has a bi-metal construction case with a steel bottom and a brass top to allow those higher pressures, safely operating at those higher pressures. And why? Why, after jettisoning the 308 battle rifle in the Cold War, why now, after decades of the GWOT, the Global War on Terror, on which I was a part, a battlefield part, why after all those decades go back to what I would consider a full power rifle cartridge? Maybe it's smaller in diameter than 308, but if you look at it, I would definitely consider the 277 Fury a full power big bore battle rifle. Why go back to that? And I'm not saying I agree with that decision. I'm not. But here's the point that I'm trying to make, is that the military, our military, looked at this, and they're not the only ones, and said, there are really some things that the big bore battle rifle does better than the intermediate cartridge. And those being ones heretofore discussed. More energy at range. It outshines at long range. It just has a bigger payload delivered on target at distance. Also, it's better at, let's say, cover and concealment are kind of fluid terms and not as rigid as we would have believe, but the big bore battle rifles, the 308s, the 6.5s, the 30 calibers, and things in that nature, they do better at those kind of intermediate barriers at, let's say, a mud hut or cinder block or a light skinned vehicle like a Toyota Hilux or whatever jalopy that a radical Islamic terrorist that wants to kill Americans has kitted up to be a VBAD, a vehicle-borne IED. That's a thing. Your full power rifle cartridge is going to do better to stop that threat than your 5.56 is. It just is. It's just the nature of physics. And it's not all roses and sunshine and unicorns. There's also a downside. That's why we got away from it in the first place. So I want to start this before I even start talking about modern full power big bore battle rifles, because this is gunfighter life and we're going to get to that. But I want to throw out the philosophy and kind of what it does better and what it doesn't do better, so that you make a wise choice and don't think that it's always better because it's more powerful. Like in America, bigger is always better, more is better, more power is always better. But it's not, because it comes at a cost. The first cost is physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Force equals mass times velocity squared. The amount of force going out of that gun is proportional to the amount of force coming back into the gun and back towards you in the opposite direction. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. You get more recoil. So, I don't care, and this is kind of a thing that gets a little bit under my skin in the gunfighting world and community. Be able to handle recoil better. Yeah, I agree, and you might surmise from my bio and my shooting competition background, I can control recoil by God's grace. But I don't care how good you control recoil, the less of it you have to control, the faster you can get hits on target. In general, if it's like a dude standing literally arm's length in front of you, then yeah, you can just work that trigger hard and fast and it'll get rounds on target. But if you move that target at any kind of distance or have to transition between targets, I don't care how well you control recoil. If there's less of it, you can shoot faster while getting hits on target. If I just put a dirt berm in front of you and say, here, empty the mag, then that's not really an issue because you're literally just going as fast as you can pull the trigger. But if you're trying to keep the gun on target or transition between targets and get multiple hits on multiple targets, if there's less recoil, you can get hits on target faster. And that's just a reality. Nobody that's winning really substantial levels of competition is outrunning a 308 big bore battle rifle against an AR-15 unless it's a separate class. Right? If you're going to a USPSA 3-gun outlaw competition, whatever you want to do, talking about a standard, that kind of practical shooting competition, those big bore rifles are not competing with the ARs because they're much slower to get hits on target. They do better at 300, 400, 500, 600, 800 yards, but that's not where the majority of your targets are in those kind of competitions. So they have their own division, usually heavy metal or something like it in an outlaw competition. Why? Because it takes longer to get hits on target. So just realize that there's no free lunch. That extra power comes at a cost. It also comes at a real financial cost in that round per round. It's usually more expensive. Now, that's one thing if Uncle Sam is footing the bill for your ammo, and I like when that happens. I like that in the past. If somebody else, some government agency, law enforcement agency, federal government, private contracting agency, whatever it is footing the bill for ammo, then yeah, that may be a moot point. But for most of us that pay for our own ammo, that's not a moot point. And it also finally comes at the cost of weight. Both weight of ammo, which is one of the big reasons we went to the M16 platform, AR-15 platform, because you got to remember, originally that was an AR-10. That was the first rifle. I believe Eugene Stoner, if Gun Lure is correct, he designed that as a hunting rifle for him and his wife in 308. It was originally in the AR-10 to 308 platform. The military wanted a smaller caliber. They went to a smaller caliber on purpose because they wanted to be able to carry more ammo. And the rifle weighs more, but it's not just that. The magazines and the ammunition also weigh more. And until we get some kind of really reliable, and I know there's that new company that just came out, but until we get some radically new technology to really cut down on the weight of ammo, then it's still going to be heavier. And even if you go with like polymer case, the projectile itself is still going to be heavier. So round per round, it's heavier. Magazine per magazine, it's heavier. So you get into that old gunfighter dichotomy. Do you want more ammo of a less powerful flavor, or do you want less ammo but each round carries more power? And I would submit both have their advantages. But those are real. Those are real things. How much they apply to you, what you care about most, that's really on you. I'll put it this way. Usually when you're doing private contracting work, when you're in the military, at least like regular frontline infantry, of which I was. I served in both the Marine Corps and the Army, as you probably heard in the bio. You get what you get, and you like it, or you don't like it, but you make do with it. Even as a private contractor, a lot of times, you're issued something and they say, here you go, enjoy. I don't say that verbatim, but that's basically the sentiment. Here's what you got. This is your issued kit. Hit the ground and run with it. You don't really get to choose. The gunfighter and the gunfighting mentality and the training and the fundamentals are far more important on how effective you're going to be than one platform versus another. And a lot of people don't like that, especially I think here where I wouldn't even say Americans, I'll say Amazonians, that think that we can fix everything by the click of a button and buying more gear and more stuff. But the gear and the stuff is nowhere near as important as the gunfighter and the training and the mastery of the fundamentals and the discipline and all the things that go into that. So you make do with what you have. But I was blessed when I was the commander of a tactical team to be able to write policies. I was the one that was part of my job. Was, as much as I liked the gunfighting, a lot of that was wearing a suit and tie and writing policies and procedures, and especially in the gunfighting world, in the equipment world. And I was blessed I got to do that. But one of the things that I wrote in was both handguns and long guns. If you could pass the qual, and this wasn't like a normal police officer, and I was a police officer, so don't get mad at me, but most police officer quals are just check the box things. They're not super hard for a really good, like halfway decent even competition shooter. But we had a very demanding qual. Even for a good gunfighter, it was a demanding qual. If you could pass the quals, then you could carry pretty much whatever you wanted within reason. I did put some parameters in there, but you could carry, if you wanted, a big bore battle rifle, or you could carry an AR-15, if you could get the job done with it. And me, speaking from me personally as a commander, sometimes I would do both. Why? Because sometimes for the mission, one was better than the other. Sometimes I would carry a full-size battle rifle. I'm very blessed to have a SCAR 17. I wanted one of those for like a decade. I saved up for it and finally got it because I was in a situation where I could actually run it professionally, and other people's lives may depend on my ability to be effective with said firearm. I got a SCAR 17. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal gun. I didn't run it all the time for every mission. Sometimes I'd carry an now considered SBR, an SBR AR-15. Very different guns because we did very different missions. Am I doing EP work in vehicles? Or am I Overwatch at a major event trying to maybe get one or two precise shots on an active shooter at distance? Right? That depended on the mission. Which one of those roles was I doing? Likewise, my men. I trusted them in their maturity to be able to choose wisely for themselves. I didn't want to be the dictator that said everybody's got to run said rifle or said handgun, especially handguns, but let's not get off subject here. And we see this mirrored in the U.S. military who went to the AR-15, and now they're looking and kind of saying, maybe we want something a little bit bigger and better. But here's the thing. I think a lot of times we can be more backwards looking than forwards looking. And we had some issues, and I say we, not me, because I don't want to misrepresent what I did. I never went to Afghanistan as a soldier Marine. I fought in Iraq. I was a few days from supposedly shipping out to Afghanistan on a contract when I got offered the job to be the commander of a tactical team here at CONUS. And I forewent the Afghanistan for that. So I have never been to Afghanistan thus far. I don't want to misrepresent what I have done. But as I understand it, we colloquially, as in our nation and our gunfighters, kind of got less than desirable effects with the AR-15 and the M4 on Afghanistan soil because of the nature of the gunfighting, longer distance engagements. And again, that's where you want a bigger, more powerful cartridge. And so we're kind of swinging back to the full power battle rifle. Is that kind of a knee-jerk reaction? Time will tell. I'm not sure that I would go that route for a mainline infantry. I'm really not. Specialty role, sure. Maybe a heavy and a fire team, sure. But every soldier, I don't know, because again, what you're giving up. You're giving up stuff too. It's not just all game when you go to a more powerful cartridge. So again, is it a knee-jerk reaction? Time will tell. And again, I don't think they're the best for every situation. But they are the best for some situations. I'm going to tell you this. If you've listened, you'll know for any length of time that my go-to, and I don't apologize for being a survivalist, a prepper, whatever you want to call it. My go-to, if the peanut butter and chocolate hits the fan. It's peeing in radiator time. You might get that reference. If it's that time, and I can carry one long gun, I'm grabbing a long gun. For me, it's not going to be a rifle at all. It's going to be a shotgun for reasons I've discussed before. But if it's going to be a rifle, and situationally dependent, I may decide, if it looks more like the peeing in the radiator scenario, I may decide, I want a rifle. Probably my go-to rifle would be a big bore battle rifle. It would be my SCAR 17. And I have a really good, I don't have a lot, but I have a really good all-around AR. I also have the SCAR 17 with a Trijicon Acupoint, no batteries required. Really good optic. LPVO, but also is pretty good at distance. I would probably pick that gun, if that says anything about the big bore battle rifle concept. I can carry less ammo right before I start tipping that firepower versus mobility, because I don't care how fit you are, how in shape you are, how fast you can run. The more weight I put on you, the slower you can run. And do you want to be able to move fast and not get shot? Or do you want to carry a bunch of ammo and look like a tactical Ninja Turtle? You get to a point where that's the case. But I'll forego the rounds, the extra rounds, knowing that each round that I have is more effective. That's just me. Also, they have advantages for hunting. And you might think, why would you need such a powerful round for something like a deer? Well, because I want to shoot it, to find it, and eat it. And again, I've been a professional hunter, you probably heard in the bio. If I am in a survival scenario, I'm likely on the move, Oscar Mike, and I might get a jump shot at many different angles. That big bore, that 308 or something like it, is going to do a much better job than a 5.56. Can you kill a deer with a 223 5.56 with good shot placement at reasonable distance with proper bullet construction, waiting for the right shot angle? Absolutely. I want to take a, very steep quartering away shot with that round? No, I don't. I want to do it with a jump shot? No, I don't. And that might be the shot that I get if I'm trying to move to a safe location and I just happen to come across a meal. And also I get less rounds, but I'm probably going to need less rounds. I'm faced with a vehicle threat coming into camp, something like that, and I have to take out a vehicle at distance. time is of the essence. I'll forego the extra rounds in the 5.56 for a more effective round per round capability of a full size fighting rifle. I just looked at the time and I'm just past 25 minutes on this episode, and we haven't even talked about modern big bore battle rifles. And this is Gunfighter Life. Let's get modern. Let's get talking about the gear, because I know that's what people really like to hear about as far as numbers go. So, let's get into it. There are many modern big bore battle rifles. The AR-15 is a very popular platform. The AR-10, even though it's older, less so. But it's still pretty popular, and there are a lot of really good options. You got to be aware of some foibles of the AR-10. It's not as ubiquitous as the AR-15 as far as the colloquial mil spec goes. You get an AR-15 lower, and I'm talking if you stick with standard mil spec stuff, as in direct impingement, as it's commonly referred to, the standard AR operating system. You get a bolt carrier group from one manufacturer. You can probably put it in the upper of another manufacturer and put it on the lower receiver of a third manufacturer. You could make a Franken AR-15, and if you know what you're doing, it'll probably run okay as long as all the parts are quality. That's not the case with the AR-10. So my advice if you're buying an AR-10 is buy a complete one, unless you really know about AR-10s, because you buy one thing and you realize, oh, this handguard doesn't work because they don't all use the same thing, or this bolt does not work at all with this operating system. So it's not as much mix and match. So be aware of that. But the AR-10 has similar advantages to the AR-15 in that it has good ergonomics. If you're familiar with the AR-15, you're probably familiar. It's just a little bit bigger version. Lightweight. Modern ones are going to have your, good modularity, good ability to mount optics, good ability. Talking any of the modern ones with a flat top upper and a rail system of whatever kind, Keymod, M-Lock, Samson, doesn't really matter. Whatever you like, whatever you have. As long as you can mount a white light and or other operational parameter stuff that you want to mount on there, you got that going for you. Really good, really modern. So you have all those advantages, and there are some good ones. I'm kind of excited about the Ruger, whatever it's called, the SFAR, short-framed AR, or small-framed AR, whatever it's called. That's a really good option. Colt made one back in the day. I don't know if they still make it, but you could switch between 308 and 5.56. That would have some pretty cool utility. But that Ruger got me excited. It seems pretty cool the way that it operates, and it seems to be a decent gun. You know my rule, if you listen for any length of time, wait 3 years. If it's not just a fun range toy, if it's something you're going to trust your life to, something that you plan on being a gunfighting gun or a defensive gun of any kind, wait 3 years. If it has issues, let somebody else find out about that, and don't be a beta tester in a gunfight. But it seems promising, and there are many other AR-10 styles and different configurations that you can get. They have advantages. I don't think they even all take the same magazines, so beware of that. We talked about the M14, the M1A, the Fulton Armory versions of that, and they are less modern, but there are some more modern versions of them. There are some with the ability to mount modern optics. It's not as streamlined. It just wasn't designed for that. But there are some that even try to be a little bit lighter, but they're still pretty heavy. So just be aware of that. It's not that it's a bad platform. I like that platform. I also really like the iron sights. And I'm a guy that likes to shoot precision with iron sights, that likes to really practice my fundamentals with iron sights. And I like good iron sights. That M14 style. I know they're not true M14s, but that's a good platform for that. But you give up the ability for good modern optics and rails, and they can be really accurate, but they can also be really finicky. So beware of that, the M14s. And they're not cheap. If you're getting one of those, you're probably getting it just because you like the platform and the historicity of it. And they're good. Again, I'm not going to talk down about that platform, but it does have its disadvantages. And just flat out my favorite one, and I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, but the Scar 17. It is a fantastic, fantastic gun. It is lightweight, 7.7 pounds. The recoil is, yeah, it's more than an AR-15, but it's not bad. You would think for as light as it is, it would recoil more than like an M14, but in my experience, it doesn't. It recoils very well for the amount that you're getting out of that gun. It's also fairly lightweight. It's also very easy to mount modern optics, although you got to put quality optics on it because it beats the crap out of stuff. But if you're putting a good quality optic on there, shouldn't be an issue. It comes with good backup flip-up iron sights. They are a completely different operating system than an AR-10. So if you don't like the concept of a gun going to the bathroom where it eats, as is commonly referred to as the AR-15 style, a less dirty operating system, a more robust, a more AK-esque operating system, the Scar 17 has it. The downside, the Scar 17 costs what a decent, reliable used car or truck costs. It's an expensive gun. So there's that. It was a long time before I got one of those, and that was when I was making the big city kind of commander of a tactical team kind of money. And I was blessed to get that gun, and I don't regret it because other people's lives may have depended on that. And when it came to it, the old lady, the widow, the little child in the city that their life may have depended on it, yeah, I wanted quality, and I don't apologize for that. But it's phenomenal. I think it's worth every penny. But also, they're very expensive. You may have other things that are more of a priority than that. There is the CZ Bren, and I've heard they have some issues. CZ makes some really good stuff. I'm a fan of CZ and their handguns and things like that. So the CZs are good guns. They usually make good guns, but I've heard of their CZ Bren series having some issues. But basically, you're getting the operating system of a Scar with way less money and probably pretty good quality, but I would look into those issues, and I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently on it, but I've heard of some issues. So look into that. But they absolutely exist. The CZ Bren is a thing, and when the patent ran out, it looks like they pretty much copied a lot of what the Scar was doing. We touched on the AK operating system. There are some bigger, beefed up versions of the AK operating system that operate on a 308. I doubt if you're looking into this and you want anything modern, you're probably not going with anything in a 7.62x54R. Even the days of really cheap surplus ammo, I think, are behind us. Not that you can't still find some, but that's just not a modern round with the rim and everything. You're probably looking at one in the 308, and they do exist. And again, to varying qualities. Just because something looks like an AK does not mean it was made to the original, like, Russian AK quality standard. And a big part of that weapon's good reputation is the quality to which they were made. And not all of the imported ones were made to such quality. So there's that caveat. But if you can get one made to that quality, it absolutely can handle the 308. So that's also an option if you can find one. And again, you got to get the ability to mount good optics, which is always something that the AK platform has struggled with. Not that it can't be done. And there is honestly kind of the new kid on the block, the kind of seemingly out of the blue, as when it happened, to me anyway, the M7 that was originally called the M5, but I think there was some kind of name issue there. Now the M7, the SIG M7 in 277 Fury, but also you can get that in 308. Perhaps I should do an entire episode on like the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor and the 277 Fury for this, because many of these rifles are available in 6.5 Creedmoor, like the M14 style and the Scar, things like that. And the 277 Fury, I don't know how to take this. I don't want to read too much into it, but it seems like there was much ado about the 277 Fury and the new M7, and then I haven't heard a lot about it. I'm not old enough to remember when the military switched from the M14 to the M16 and how quickly that happened. I haven't heard a lot about it. Is it still going forward? Is everything still running smoothly? Is Big Army still looking at this? Are they still doing it? I don't know. If they do, the 277 Fury, if the past is any indication of future acceptance by civilians, when a military really adopts a cartridge, it becomes popular in the civilian market. 45 ACP, 9mm, 223, 556, 308, right? If the 277 Fury does largely become adopted, it certainly will become a more popular round for other places as well, if that happens. For the time being now, though, 308 is kind of king. But that new M7 platform, it has a lot going for it. I like a lot about it. I'm fairly familiar with that operating system. It's got the dual springs, unlike the AR-15, AR-10 platform, which I never liked about the buffer tube and buffer tube spring and the ergonomics of the shouldering of it. I just never, as somebody that grew up hunting in what I would call more traditional guns with the drop-down stock, it just always felt more natural to me. So that new M7, that whole operating system, it gets rid of the need, just like the SCAR 17 did, of the buffer tube, so you can fold the stock. That's a big advantage, and in my opinion, you get a more ergonomic stock. You can get a more ergonomic stock. It's a good operating system. They got rid of, thankfully, the direct impingement. I've never been a big fan of that. It's great for competition. It's great for police work. It's great for, like, CONUS, fairly clean operations. But as somebody that had a catastrophic failure of my M16 in the war, never been a big fan of that direct impingement system. I've seen other failures besides mine, but it's a different operating system. It's short stroke piston, I do believe. It's very different than a SCAR, very different than an AK, but it shares some similarities, but it's not the same. But it is similar in that it's the piston and it stays fairly clean. So it seems like a good option. They're still crazy pricey right now as any of the new trendy stuff is, but I assume that in time those prices will come down. But that's also a really good option. The Spear, the M7, whatever you want to call that family genre operating system. And it comes in different calibers, but we're talking about big bores, so we're talking the full size 308, 277 Fury kind of platform. I imagine for a while they'll be trying to get stuff ready for the military, but in time, I'm sure those will be more readily available. Anyway, that's probably all the ones I'm going to discuss in detail. There are certainly others. That doesn't make them bad, but I can't obviously discuss every single different one. We'll probably do a whole episode on the different AR-10s and their advantages and disadvantages compared to one another. But I think this is a good overarching discussion of big bore battle rifles, history, usefulness, advantages, disadvantages, and then good modern options. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Gunfighter Life. If you did, consider becoming part of the tribe, GoodShepherdTraining.com. You can contact me, GoodShepherdTraining.com, or give your support, anything like that, GoodShepherdTraining.com. Feel free to reach out to me there. Getting into the tactical tip of the day. Lubrication of these fighting weapons, whether it's a semi-auto pistol or an AR-15 or a big bore battle rifle. If you just want a one and done solution for lubrication, CLP, right? CLP is what we used in the Marine Corps. Unless you're talking about machine guns with like LSA, CLP was pretty much it. And it'll do most things okay. But if you want to kind of optimize stuff, what I would suggest is, with some exceptions for different climates, but for most inhabitable zones where most people live, I would suggest really fine, thin gun oil for your trigger systems, whether it's handgun or, again, AR-15 or a full-size, full-power rifle. fine oil for your trigger components, like a REM oil. If you've been around guns for any length of time, you probably know the consistency that REM oil is. It's a good oil for that. And I would consider something more viscous, with more viscosity, a little bit thicker for your big parts, like on a handgun, your barrel to slide lockup, or for an AR-15, the bolt carrier group. For a SCAR 17, that massive bolt, I would encourage something more viscous. Something in between or even up to a grease. Maybe a white lithium grease if you want. Maybe some fairly thick full synthetic motor oil if you shoot a lot and run your gun a lot. And there's one product that made me think of this tactical tip that I recommended to someone who lives in one of our, I don't know if it's a protectorate, whatever it would be called, but one of the island places that I don't want to say own, but are affiliated with. So a very maritime environment where rust is a big thing, saltwater environment. I recommended this to him, and I've been using it for a long time. And it's the Hyperlube. It's an engine oil additive. It's really thick, really viscous. It comes in a fairly big container, and for gunfighting use will last you a really, really long time. And it's the Hyperlube. It comes in like a cylinder. It's meant to be added to engine oil, but it absolutely works good for that thicker application. So if you're going to like a training class, you're going to put hard use on a big bore battle rifle, you're going to go through a couple of thousand rounds in a week. That really thick viscous stuff on those big parts, I really like that. If you decide you just want to run CLP on everything, that's fine. Again, it'll do pretty much everything. If you want like one lubricant for your bug out bag or for your range bag, yeah, it's a good thing to have. But if you want to kind of take it to the next level, I would encourage the thinner stuff for the trigger components and the thicker stuff for the big, beefy, slamming around moving parts. Anyway, tactical tip of the day. Tactical verse of the day. Because if you win 100 gunfights and you die and go to hell, game over, man. That's you're focusing on the wrong things. This earth, this life is but a temporary dwelling. We're strangers and pilgrims on the earth. We were meant for more. Talked about it's less important whether you decide AR-15 or AR-10 than what kind of gunfighter you are, your discipline, your fundamentals, your training. All that's vastly more important. You know what's vastly more important than how good a gunfighter you are? How good a man you are. How do you follow God? How do you trust in God? Your fear of God and your faith in God. Those things are just so much more important. It's not even on the same level. God gives us all gifts and talents to be used. But remember, the talents are not to be worshipped. The gifts are not to be worshipped. The giver, the creator, is to be worshipped. What do you have that you did not first receive? You are because he made you. You have because he gave you. And you love because he first loved you. With that, the verse of the day from Matthew 13. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have abundance. Thanks for listening, men. Have a blessed day.